Welcome to the TELUS Originals DocTalks, a series of talks dedicated to craft, themes, and ideas behind TELUS Originals documentaries with the people behind and in front of the camera. I am your host, Sabrina Rani Furminger, and for this episode, we'll be talking to Quinn Barabash about Deep Sea BC. In Deep Sea BC, Captain Quinn explores the deepest parts of the Strait of Georgia to search for, discover, and document some of the strange creatures that live in these dark and mysterious environments, including box crab, opal squid, prawns, six-gill sharks, ratfish, and more. Over 3 beautifully shot episodes, Captain Quinn shares his passion for the wonders of the deep of the Salish Sea by taking us on the adventure of a lifetime, deeper than most of us have ever been or will ever go. Today, we'll speak with Captain Quinn, aka Quinn Barabash, about the hows and whys of Deep Sea BC. Quinn Barabash, Captain Quinn, welcome to TELUS Originals DocTalks.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Nice to meet you.
Very nice to meet you as well, Captain Quinn. What is your earliest memory of the sea?
Oh, it would be just fishing with my opa off the rocks on the Strait of Georgia, Salish Sea, in front of his place there, and just catching little rock cod, running along the beach with my brothers, flipping over rocks, looking at the little shore crabs that you can find there, and catching little sculpin in the little tidal pools, and just it would be that. Yeah, just playing in the intertidal zone, fishing with my opa.
That's incredible that you've made this project about this sea, this part of the world, and it is part of who you are. It's where you come from. How do you describe your relationship to the sea?
I would say it's a relationship that, like you said, kind of goes back to my childhood. So it's old, as long as I can remember, but it's one fueled by curiosity. Like I can't help myself when I'm on or near the water just to wonder, like, what's beneath the surface. It's so mysterious. And then, like, you can imagine, you can create a picture in your head of what you would imagine would be under the water. And then you can actually catch some of the things that live down there, and they're more bizarre and more beautiful than you ever could have imagined. So the reality, like, usually we can push things with our imagination to be, extra brilliant or extra beautiful or extra bizarre. But when it comes to the ocean, there's no need to push them. They are just that way naturally, and they surpass, the reach of our imagination, which is just, yeah.
I love that you just, like, you're speechless almost. Like, you just trailed off into speechless, because it is like, what can you imagine? It's probably there. We don't know. We can't go. But your project is a wonderful way of really bringing people, to places that we haven't been before. So tell me a bit about the origin story of Deep Sea BC. What inspired you to begin telling, this particular story, for the screen?
Yeah. So, like, I grew up along the ocean, and then when I was in a young adult, I worked on a commercial prawn boat, and we would check 500 traps a day, and we pull stuff up from 200 to 600, 700 feet, and there's creatures that you're pulling up from a part of the ocean that, unless you're a deep sea diver, like, nobody will ever go see firsthand, and stuff I've never seen before. And I always thought it would be so cool, so fascinating to be able to document like what the prawns do, where they live, what their prawn as an example, some of these creatures, what they do, what their home looks like, instead of just looking at them, flopping around on the deck of a boat. Like, where do they come from? I always thought it would be really interesting to explore that. But back then, there wasn't the technology to do so. And then in more recent years, with the sort of, I guess, advancements in ROV technology, it became a possibility. And then so I started kind of connecting the dots and working with the TELUS team, Malcolm Oliver, to kind of bring this idea of using, deep sea cameras and ROVs and lights to essentially capture these creatures interacting in these deep sea sort of ecosystems, that I was curious about, 20 to 30 years previously, but didn't have the technology to do so. So it was one of those things, I think, with a lot of, films, and a lot of things in life, it's timing. It was sort of, everything kind of aligned to create this opportunity. And we were able to execute it, but I mean, getting the idea was a huge part of, and the funding was a huge part of the equation, as any filmmaker will tell you. But then actually executing it, once you've secured funding, once you've greenlit a project, is a completely different ballgame entirely. And if you're doing a scripted show, or even just say a show above land, you have all kinds of challenges that you have to overcome in order to see that production across the finish line. When you're dealing with, the bone-crushing atmospheric pressure at 1,000 feet that could just cripple your equipment on day one, that you don't have the budget to replace, and you can lose, your whatever it is, $60,000 worth of equipment in one shoot, and you still have stuff, to film down the road. It's like, it was a pretty high risk production in that regard.
Yeah.
You have tides, you have the atmosphere, you have entanglement, you have, jagged bottoms, coral reefs, you have, whales, all kinds of stuff that could go wrong when you're on and under the water. So there was definitely a level of anxiety that I carried with me throughout the entire production. And then on top of that, you're trying to make it captivating and interesting and, tell a story. So it was a tremendously challenging project, but also I think it was a bit groundbreaking in this realm. And I think we proved that we could do it. Because I think there was a lot of people, even on the TELUS team, like Malcolm, going, I don't know how this is going to go, but it sounds cool enough that we need to at least try. And so when we were able to cross the finish line, I think that was really rewarding. And from what I've heard, it's been doing quite well on the TELUS platform. So I was really hoping to do a season 2, because I've got a list of 15 other creatures and episodes written out that I would really love to continue to explore and share with the world. So, but maybe down the road.
Fingers crossed. What did you do then? I mean, because I love talking about challenges, especially for a project such as this, where, I mean, I've watched the 3 episodes. It's beautiful. So obviously you succeeded. But, as far as like, what kind of work did you do before you put the equipment in the water? Because I'm assuming like you must have done some kind of like some tests or something, just to make sure, that you weren't going to, that the cameras wouldn't get completely crushed, or that things would work. Like, can you nerd out a little bit and tell us some of the technical stuff that you did before you even broke the surface of the water?
Yeah, for sure. Before, I mean, part of it was just literally jumping in, you know, head first. I knew we had to get into the water, but so that involved, doing quite a bit of research and modifying, GoPros so they can, drop down to, 1,000 feet or more. Lighting was a huge challenge because obviously down, you go below a couple 100 feet in the ocean and it's pitch black.
Mm.
And you're not going to see anything if you don't have lights down there. So I kind of just started at the surface, in a depth where if I lost some equipment, I could swim down and get it.
Yeah.
But and then also, once we did have, a pretty good sense of confidence around our gear and our equipment and our strategy, when we went down with the ROV for the first time to like 300 feet, there was this fear in the back of my mind that like we were going to see nothing. So we've put all this effort in, and then maybe things would just shy away from the camera, or we were just in this barren, ocean floor. That in some of our drops, it did look like the surface of the moon for,
Yeah.
A, quite an extensive area. And we're talking about the ocean floor here, right? Like it's over 70% of our whole planet, and it's underwater. And yeah, but the technical side was just making sure lights work, making sure that the connection between the ROV and the tether and the controller work, making sure the cameras, the lights work, testing within a reasonable range for recovery, and then just a leap of faith beyond that, because the tether on the ROV can withstand, I think it's 500 pounds. So if you wrap that, you can imagine, the potential for disaster when you have, 500, 600, 700 feet of tether out going down to the ocean floor. You have everything on the bottom that could cause issues. Plus you have anything floating mid-water column, plus your own boat, you're anchored off. But if your anchor, starts dragging, you could very easily end up in a situation where you're just going to lose everything, equipment-wise.
But luckily, that did not happen.
Yeah.
But although you did, there was some kind of sea mammal that did go at the, like it went at the light or something, right?
Yeah. So we did lose that light, which was $1,000 just for the light, and the battery, the casing. We managed to recover the camera, but that was an expensive day of just.
I bet. Now, I mean, there are many joys associated with deep sea BC, among them, like being able, like these just striking visuals, it's so alive down there, but also we get to meet some creatures that, I mean, I did not know that fish could have big old teeth like that, So can you tell me, how did you decide what creatures you were going to seek out? Like, do you have a list somewhere that you've carried in your mind for years? I'm like, I gotta go and meet this. I gotta try and find, this creature, that creature.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you grow up along the coastline here and you spend time fishing, I think everybody who has grown up along the ocean fishing has a list of animals that they're curious about and would like to know more about. And yeah, for me, obviously, it's like any documentary, any filmmaker will tell you that you kind of have to pivot, adapt, and evolve in natural history. Like this is a perfect example. Like I have a list of, 15 to 20 different animals that I would love to have featured and documented, but just because you are curious about them doesn't mean they're going to come and present themselves as a subject in your film. So you kind of have to take what you get. You plan for, like the box crab one, for example, that was a complete fluke. I had nobody in the world, if you were a photographer or a filmmaker and said, I really want to go film brown box crabs in an aggregation as they're on their way to spawn, there isn't a single person in the world that could go, okay, go here and you'll see that. So that was a total fluke chance discovery, and it was really cool. There was a stubby squid cruising around with these box crab, and to see that as well was really neat. There was a shrimp that were hitching rides on the shells of these box crab, and I'll bet you there's, you know, less than 10% of people who live in BC along the coastline who even know what a brown box crab is, because yeah, I mean, they're not commonly caught even by people who go fishing for red rock and Dungeness crab regularly. Few people know what they are, and even fewer people I've never seen footage of them before. So that was really cool. So in answer to your question, yes, I have a list, but as any documentary filmmaker will tell you, a list will only take you so far. At some point, your film will evolve and be forced to adapt as you embark on the journey of making a documentary.
Yeah.
Even more so underneath the surface of the ocean.
Yeah. I don't know if this is a technical term, but bonkers. What was the most absolutely bonkers creature you encountered, you know, in the process of working on this project?
Yeah, I mean, octopus are incredible. Any opal squid, the opal squid were really cool. The dog sharks, they're not as exciting or, you know, sexy per se, like the prawns, the crustaceans. They're kind of, I don't know, they're not as, you know, I guess, appealing as maybe an octopus or a six-gilled shark, but I still found them really fascinating to observe, you know, hanging out on the ocean floor. And they're responsible, like they're the ones who clean up all the crud that falls to the ocean floor so it doesn't become choked out by muck and completely dead. So
Yeah.
But I think bonkers, like the big shock and awe animals, the ratfish.
That was what I was hoping.
Yeah. When those things appeared on camera, have you ever seen anything that looks as bizarre as that creature?
The teeth, the cartilage, if I saw that, that's like something an AI would make up. Like if I saw, I would not, like I would believe that's like from some kind of sci-fi thing.
Yes.
Just for me, like I was watching, I'm like, this is bonkers.
Yes.
What? That could hurt me.
Yeah.
That's bonkers.
Yeah. And the spike sticking out of its back is actually venomous.
Of course it is.
Yes. And it's like this long and razor sharp at the tip. And they have actually found full-grown, you know, 1,000-pound sea lions who have tried ingesting one of these ratfish, dead, because it punctured the stomach wall and killed it, you know, internally. And they have so few predators. Six-gilled sharks are actually one of their predators, but and I've never met anyone who's even tried eating one of them. So that's rare. Most fish have been, you know, attempted to be eaten by at least someone, but not the ratfish. And it's probably because they look so freaky.
Yeah, I will. I mean, I will be carrying this series with me for many years to come. I know that. But I have a feeling that the ratfish is going to be the thing that haunts my nightmares. So thanks a lot, Captain Quinn.
Yeah.
You include some other voices in your series. It's not all you. Can you tell me about, uh, the people that you feature in interviews, in your series and why you chose to include them?
For sure. So, as with the creatures themselves, I had an extensive list of animals I would like to encounter and explore. I had a similar list with the people. Um, and in some ways, that list was even longer because if you've grown up or spent, a lifetime or a childhood or any portion of your life in and amongst the sea, you're going to have some very interesting stories at least at some point, right? Like, so there are, like, the ocean has been the inspiration for thousands and thousands and thousands of years of crazy stories, kraken, sea monsters, mermaids, like, you name it. It's been inspired by someone's encounter with something, whether it's, the part of the natural world or the supernatural world that's come from the ocean. It's
Yeah.
shaped stories for forever. And so I wanted to find people who have had, who have created or shared or witnessed some of these stories, some crazy encounters with the sea and the things that live in it. And so I really wanted to get someone who scuba dives.
Mm.
And so that was, I actually interviewed 5 different scuba divers. And, just with the way things work, you only have a certain amount of time, in a episode. But so the scuba divers was high on my list. I reached out to a couple saturation divers who can actually dive down, thousands of feet. And I've heard countless stories, and, in that realm from divers. A biologist I thought would be interesting, someone who kind of works in that realm and kind of understands the natural world, from a biologist's perspective. And then obviously, Wes Jeffries, he's a friend of ours, but also, he's group Salish, like he Coast Salish, grew up there. And, the ocean is embedded in their culture, of all of the coastal First Nations, extremely embedded deep in their culture. And so there's that element as well, which is fascinating and educational, inspirational. So that's just kind of how I landed. There's about, on those 3 subjects, but there's about, I think it's endless. Like, you could actually keep this series going forever between the people you could potentially interview who have some sort of captivating story to tell and the creatures that exist beneath the surface. You could, it would be endless. I feel like you mentioned you've done this podcast over 300 episodes or something.
I have podcasted in my life for over 300. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You could do that with this series, whether it was even just a podcast asking people to share, crazy stories about the ocean. There's just no shortage there. And then obviously beneath the ocean, the creatures are,
it's as endless as the ocean itself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well,
what was your best day working on this? And I know that there's like pre-production and post. So let's just get you in, like, anything to do with you being on the water then.
Yeah, to be honest, like, every day that I came back and had footage and didn't lose everything was like a big breath of relief.
Oh yeah.
Like, it was a great day when I was back at the dock with all my equipment and I've captured something. That was a really good day. But one day, we started the day and we went fishing for lingcod and we caught some lingcod. And then we went and dropped the ROV to look for some prawns. one of the most exciting discoveries, and it was actually later that day, was finding a glass sponge reef. Because they are like they're these ancient organisms that were around when the dinosaurs were around, and they've discovered quite a few of them in Howe Sound and along the Central Coast. But the specific one that we found had never been discovered, and so I reported it to Tla'amin Nation and the federal government, and they had no idea it was there. Um, and they're really important rearing grounds for juvenile rockfish and other crustaceans. So they're pretty awesome to see and to film and to photograph, because they're light in color, and they film really well because they reflect the light, and then the background is like black, and they just look really cool. And,
Yeah.
that was really exciting to discover that, because I knew what it was right away, but I wasn't expecting to see it. So
Yeah. Along the same lines then, what was your worst day?
losing the
The light?
deep sea camera rig, the camera trap with the light. We got the camera back, but yeah, losing the light and the battery was disappointing, because I had other big plans for that, and that was kind of like the end of that.
Yeah.
That
I'm sorry. My condolences.
yeah. But yeah, that was frustrating. And then nothing went right that day. We had massive tangles with ropes, and the weather was crappy, and but
You made it through.
we did. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, we see your kids in the
Yeah.
series. What is their relationship to the sea?
Is one that I hope that I helped guide them into, but it's also, I would say, fueled by curiosity and appreciation for these places and these animals. They love fishing. They love snorkeling. They can't get enough of it. So that's been really cool to see. And they're the best. Like, if I'm going out on the water, there's no one else I'd rather be out there with than them, because they're so fun and they're really capable now. And it's really cool seeing the world through like a child's eyes. Like, they have an appreciation that's, not distracted. Like, I feel like as adults, we spend too much of our life distracted by things, and we're never really present to fully appreciate the beauty that surrounds us in a moment or whatever it might be. But with kids, they're so focused on the present, and it's refreshing being around them in a place that deserves to be appreciated.
Yeah. What clues can the deep sea tell us, either about the past, but also like the present? Because you talked about, being in the moment. Like, does the deep sea, can it tell us anything about the overall health of the planet?
Yeah, I think so, for sure. And like, the fact that it's so unexplored means that there's just endless possibilities of discovering, something that could help us steer us back on track as a society. But I also think we're beyond the point as a species of using our like net. I don't know how to say this word. Naivety.
Naivete.
Naivete.
Yeah.
As an excuse,
Right.
to not recognize the problems that we're facing. Right. We know that we shouldn't be destroying our world's carbon sinks. We shouldn't be cutting down the last of the old growth forests. We shouldn't be continuing to log, our forests at a massive scale, because that has serious environmental implications. they absorb the carbon from the atmosphere. Climate change is pretty sure we can all agree that it's happening. Coral reefs are massive carbon sinks. Deep water coral reefs are massive carbon sinks. So, if you go to a place where those reefs are dying, that's, I think, a pretty big indication that we're failing our planet and our future generations. If you go to a place where the coral reefs are thriving, and you see the vibrance and the abundance and the diversity in life that is part of like a healthy functioning reef and an ecosystem as a whole, it's tremendously vibrant. And you juxtapose that to a reef that's just this brown dead thing engulfed by muck, lifeless on the sea floor. I think that's pretty telltale, right? So if you're looking for clues as a species, we obviously want to work really hard to protect what is still intact, healthy, functioning ecosystems, whether it's a coral reef, 3,000 feet below the surface of the sea, housing an abundance of, diverse life, or, one of the last remaining old growth forests above the water. So I think the clues are in the observations. It's not hard to see the difference between, a healthy, vibrant piece of our ocean floor and a dead piece of our ocean floor. So.
Yeah. In the time then that you have been communing with the Salish Sea, in the Strait of Georgia, like what kind of changes have you noticed? And like, would you characterize it as healthy or in failing health?
That's a really good question. And I think you could, I think obviously, with the case of the basking shark, it's not a good example. Like they're all gone from the Salish Sea. And I would say that, the bulk of, there used to be halibut everywhere in the Salish Sea. There's not as many. There's still the odd one that people can catch there. I think it depends on the species that you're looking at if you're going to pick apart trends in ocean health in that specific area. You could look at it on a species by species basis, or you could look at it as a, ocean health as a whole. So it depends. Like if you're a fisherman and you like catching salmon, you might remember what it was like in the 40s, 50s, or 60s, and you'd look at it now and you'd say, you should have seen what it was like back then.
Right.
If you were to take a snapshot 20 years ago, it was terrible. Like the 90s and early 2000s, the salmon fishing had basically completely collapsed. And this is coming from someone who would spend 12 hours a day out on the water looking for salmon.
Yeah.
And then you compare it to now, there seems to be a bit of an upswing in salmon. I think that there's a lot of work that the hatcheries do on the mainland and over on Vancouver Island. So I think it depends on how you want to measure that. I would say, it's not to the point of being too late. You look at a lot of the work being done in kelp reforestation and eelgrass. A lot of that has been removed. There's entire kelp forests that used to exist in that area that provide home to, juvenile salmon and countless other species that are still not there, that have been removed and are not there any longer. Yeah. But people are trying to reestablish those areas. I think that there's some really good work that's being done. I think that we still need to really do better to understand it and the complexities. but the reward is, you know, a healthy ocean for future generations and a
Yeah.
healthier planet. You know, we talk about the microplastics and, you know, getting into the ocean. You know, essentially, if we don't do a better job, we're going to be poisoning our food chain, which is going to lead to all kinds of health implications for our own species, but every other living creature on this planet.
Mm.
Whether it's, you know, cancer or, yeah.
We don't even know yet.
No, I don't think we know the extent of the damage that we've even done already. I do think we're starting to see it, and if you really pay close attention, you could, yeah, recognize some of the impacts. But yeah, I don't know. That's a challenging question to ask, to answer, really.
Yeah.
But I I think it's important for people to start thinking about it and
Yeah.
start asking themselves that question. Um, and it's one that you can only really answer by having a relationship with the ocean
Mm.
area, and that's the best way to get an idea of what's happening out there.
Yeah. What kind of misconceptions do you see um, among the land-based folk? Maybe people who don't have a relationship with the ocean. Misconceptions about the deepest depths of the Salish Sea.
Yeah, I think for most people, it's not even in their thinking.
Yeah.
Um, you know, you go on for a ride on the ferry and you look at the water and you go up on deck and you look and, oh, that's beautiful. Maybe you see a whale, you see some seagulls, and that's kind of, for a lot of people, that's the ocean
Mm.
because that's their experience with it, right? Um, and there's nothing wrong with that because it is beautiful, but it's like the tiniest um, fraction of the whole picture, right? Um, so I guess a misconception would be that, like, honestly, you look at the ocean, you look at the surface of the ocean from land or from the sea, and you look at it and you go, oh yeah, that looks like an ocean. But it hides below its surface so much more. And just because you can't see it from above doesn't mean it doesn't exist below. So, um, you know, it's been a dumping ground forever. Like, big
Mm.
industry could get a dumping permit to literally just barge their garbage out and dump it in a deep spot off Texada Trench. Uh,
Oh,
Fish farms, um, you know, I think the idea, even, you know, big freighters, commercial fishing boats, you know, cruise ships, like, you drop it, you say you throw a piece of garbage in the ocean, and it's only on your mind while it still remains on the surface.
right.
It sinks below the surface, and there's this assumption that it's just disappeared. It hasn't. It's gone to the bottom where it's gonna, you know, essentially pollute that
Yeah.
area. So
Impact everything around it.
I think
Yeah.
a big misconception would be that the ocean will just swallow our garbage and be okay. We can just do whatever we want to the ocean and it'll be fine. But at a certain point, there's going to be a tipping point. We're going to hit that threshold of no return. Another huge misconception is that we can just keep take
Mm.
more fish, you know, more fish, feed the world with them, and then there's still going to be more fish. You know, we can keep damming and building roads over the salmon bearing rivers and, you know, not work to fix what we've destroyed. And it's going to be okay because the fish will just keep coming back. I think
Mm.
that's the biggest misconception, is that we can continue to take and use it without actually looking after it. And it's going to continue to provide for us because it
Yeah.
won't. We need to work to make sure our relationship with the ocean is sustainable. I also don't think it's fair, you know, working on the commercial prawning industry for a little while there, you're taking one small local area's resources, the spot prawn from the small little area on central, BC coastline. And we're catching them, by the thousands of tons, and we're feeding the mouths of the world with them. The demand is huge. Yeah. You have a global demand for a supply that's limited to this one little local area, right? Mm-hmm. That's not sustainable. And that's why I think if you look at the trends of any commercially harvestable fish or creature, everything's downward trending. So the pressures and the demands of globalization and the way we have been treating our environment to date is forcing us to a point where I think we can't ignore the fact that we've had a tremendous negative impact to date on these resources, these fish, these animals, these species. The second you label a fish or an animal or a plant a resource, it seems to be the beginning of the end for that specific thing, right?
Yeah. I was having a conversation recently with a group of people, and conversation started to drift towards the sea and the deep sea. And there were quite a few people there who were terrified of thinking about the ocean, thinking about the vastness. We also started talking about outer space, and they had the same kind of thoughts, as well. What do you say to, like, is there a role, that like fear or maybe just feeling very humbled and feeling very small, when regards to the ocean, like that can be, healthy or contribute to, sustainability? Like, what do you say to people? Like, I don't know if you've encountered people who are like, oh, you're always in the sea. Gosh, isn't it scary? Aren't you scared?
Oh, you should be scared.
Healthy fear. Fear is healthy.
In certain, like, if you're not aware of the local conditions and what tide and wind and current can do, and you can't read weather, you can get yourself into a life-threatening situation immediately. So I mean, the ocean is taken, like, I don't know if you've seen the Fisherman's Memorial out on the East Coast there in Nova Scotia, but like, it's crazy. Even the ones in Prince Rupert, people would go out, a family of, father and 4 sons would go out on a boat and they would all die trying to catch Atlantic cod or whatever it was. I mean, that tale's been told many, many, many times over. So it's an incredibly intimidating place to be respected and not taken lightly, the risks. But you can also, learn to do it in a way where you're managing those risks, and it is relatively safe. There's risk every day out, just going outside. So it can be a lot worse out on the ocean if you don't know what you're doing. If you're going offshore, fishing for tuna, there's an elevated sense of risk. You need different equipment, different vessel, a different experience to push the boundaries. You can always push the boundaries, but if you're rowing, 100 feet off in a lake or just off the shore here on a calm day, there's still risks, but they're, a lot less. So yeah, I think the sea is to definitely be respected, and it's proven that. But I don't think that necessarily should lead to a fear that leads to people not developing a relationship with the sea, because I think that relationship is really important in developing a sense of appreciation for how important, it is. So yeah, I don't know if that kind of answers your question. I think it's a
Absolutely.
well-founded fear, but I think that you can take little steps. Like,
Yeah.
if you're curious about the ocean, you get yourself a mask and snorkel and you play around in 5 feet of water, you're going to see thousands of incredible little creatures that just blow your mind. And you
Yeah.
don't need to go more than 10 feet offshore. So,
Amazing.
yeah, baby
Yeah.
steps. If you're,
Baby little
yeah.
doggy paddles. How did the process of making Deep Sea BC change your relationship with the Salish Sea, if at all?
Yeah, I would say it was really rewarding in that, like, I literally had this idea when I was 17 and I'm 40. So 23 years ago, I started thinking about this.
Hmm.
And to be able to go to the same places that I was curious about when I was either pulling up prawn traps or dropping a fishing line, and visit it myself through a screen, through this technology, it was really cool. It's really hard to explain too. Like, if you, I don't know, go mushroom picking or berry picking with someone that you care about, and it's part of this foundational piece of your childhood,
Yep.
and then you get to go revisit that area, like, you've had that physical connection to that area that's, triggered all of your senses.
Mm.
And you go back there 20 years later and you'll remember that, right? But with the ocean, you know, you're able to go there and you're able to have this connection to that area, but only with only a few of your senses. Like, you are not physically present in that area that you're interacting with through a rod and reel or a trap. And that's the interesting thing about fishing, I think, or trapping, is that you're interacting with a world that you're not physically present in. well, but while being physically present in the area above the surface, you're not. I mean, if you scuba dive or you snorkel, that's a completely different experience.
Right.
But it's really hard to scuba dive below 100 feet. You can do it, but the risks compound the deeper you go. And for me, I've never scuba dived. I've gone to 100 feet and maybe just over, but you're limited to a couple minutes, if that. And I'm not going to go saturation diving. Like, I have no desire to do that.
No,
So the
let the
ROV,
ratfish do that. And
totally, totally. The ROV was a incredible technology that I was able to use to go and interact with those places. It's not the same as being there, physically, but it was still the next best thing, which was really cool.
yeah. I'm just so curious because you said you grew up, basically in the water. Um, at what point were you like in your journey? Were you like, I'm going to be a filmmaker? Was that like when did that happen? And like, how did your relationship with the sea, impact, your desire to tell stories for the screen?
Yeah, I think that um for me, the ocean and the natural world have always been a huge source of inspiration for me, because it's always triggered a curiosity, and it propels me out into these places and these wild new experiences. And in that journey, I've always been learning, and you'll never stop learning if you never stop exploring these places. So, um, and I thought it was just fascinating. And, I can't understand why everybody isn't always out there exploring the woods and the oceans and the rivers, because it's better than anything you'll ever get in a video game or or a documentary or a TV show or even a podcast. I'm sorry. The real McCoy out there when you're, sitting just on your back in the forest listening to all the sounds. Like just that is, oh man, a rooster, crowing in the background of the platform. It's proving the point. He agrees. But so I think that relationship that I've had and done my best to try to nurture over the years, the natural kind of, I think, progression is, well, not always, but to share that inspiration, to share that passion, to share that the curiosity, the information that you learn through these experiences, the tendencies to share it, because it seemed to me at some point in my younger years that not enough people appreciated it, to the point that we weren't protecting it. And so I figured, more people need to appreciate this. And if they were inspired even just a little bit to go outside and develop a relationship with these wild places through fishing or hiking or mushroom picking or whatever it is, then that will lead them to this massive appreciation for these beautiful places. And that will in turn lead them to want to protect it, to think a little bit more critically about some of the decisions we make and the impacts we have as a species, as individuals and collectively. And then maybe we can turn this ship around, or at least adjust the course in a way where there is going to be excellent fishing opportunities and wilderness opportunities and wild ecosystems and healthy animal populations for my kids, my kids' kids, future generations. And so I would say that is how my career in filmmaking was kicked off. It was by this recognition at a younger age that we need to just do a better job of protecting our planet. And in order to do that, more people need to see how incredible it is. And it's not easy to do. Like a lot of people, live in the city, they get up in their apartment, they go down to their car in their elevator, in their parkade, they drive to work, park in another parkade, go up in an elevator to their office, go back down, and they never actually are outside for a second in the day. And, that's just kind of what society demands of us is it's a lot. Working full time, paying an unaffordable mortgage, crazy interest rates, like food costs, like it's hard to have a moment to go out. And I say no more times than I should to going out fishing now, because life,
Yeah. I hear that. At least though you do have the opportunity when you want to jump on the boat, pull up anchor and sail away. You mentioned, that, I mean, the numbers for, people are watching this. What of people who have reached out to you, and to tell you that, that they've watched it and it means a lot to them, what kind of feedback has really touched you?
Yeah, the feedback for my films and videos, and then this one specifically, has been extremely positive. And it is nice to read that. To be honest though, I try not to focus too much on say like the comment section of a video, because I don't know, I feel like it's just I don't know, you get good and bad, and you never really know like what follows that. Like I've had people write me really heartfelt emails and comments, and it's really wonderful to get that feedback. And I've had people come up to me in person and say, like, you're the reason I got into fishing, or you're the reason I moved out here. You're the reason I now working in, conservation, or total strangers. And that's cool to hear. And I'm glad I was able to, help shape, their path towards understanding and pursuing what they want to pursue in this realm, whether it's through fishing, like, or work or living in certain areas. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of as far as it goes for me. Like, that's, everyone's living their own life. And if all the comments were negative, I don't think it would change my relationship with this. I don't do it for that reason.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's nice to get nice comments and nice feedback, but at the end of the day, it's not why I'm doing this, to be told that, your video is awesome or your video sucked.
Yeah.
But to back up a little bit, I know my hope for this whole, journey of becoming a filmmaker was to inspire people to get out and develop a relationship with the environment. So when someone tells me, you're the reason I got into fishing, and you're the reason I'm, moved out here to explore this part of the world, that's kind of like, I did it.
That's pretty cool.
I did it to a degree. So, and then who knows what that's going to lead to for, the world as a whole.
Yeah. Well, Quinn, we're coming to the end of our time together today. So for my final question, I want you to speak to the people who maybe they live in Vancouver, let's say, and they don't have a relationship with the sea, but they want to. What is an action that they can take to begin having a good relationship, a deeper, more profound relationship with the sea?
Yeah. I mean, for me, the obvious answer is to just find someone with a boat and get them to take you fishing for an hour, catch something, look at it, go down to the dock and just look at the shiners down at the dock, and go to it for a walk along the beach and flip over a rock. And then stop and really put your phone down and just look at, like, in a tidal pool, watch a barnacle, watch it like it's, I don't even know what it's called. It looks like a tongue will come out, and it's just constantly, look at the different moving parts. Just sit there, be still, find a tidal pool on a low tide. Here's the answer.
Okay.
Go for a walk along the beach at low tide. Find a tidal pool and just sit there and watch everything moving, and just sit there for a half an hour and observe it. It'll blow your mind. Flip over a rock and just really, really focus on watching these things move and interact because a tidal pool, it's a tiny little ecosystem, right?
Yeah.
It'll have barnacles, it'll have maybe some mussels, some shore crabs, maybe some eels, some little gunnels, maybe a little octopus. And to just sit there and to observe it, it's relaxing, but it's also like, you can't help but that part of your brain is going to stir. Like, why is that color? Why is that crab that pattern? And then you start thinking, okay, well, it's probably adapted over millions of years to be exactly the way it is. Think about that. Like, that's crazy, right? And then why? Was it because there's something else out there that wants to eat it? And if it's this color, it's going to get eaten. Just start asking yourselves, let your brain and let your curiosity start, firing as you just sit there and quietly observe these creatures in this tiny little tidal pool. Because, yeah, I think it will happen for people.
Yeah, that is absolutely wonderful advice. Thank you so, so much, Captain Quinn.
Thank you.
And thank you for listening to and watching the TELUS Originals Doc Talks, and to our guest, Quinn Barabash. Watch TELUS Originals documentaries at TELUS Optik TV Channel 8 and watch.telusoriginals.com and follow us at TELUS Originals on Instagram. DocTalks are a production of TELUS Originals. This episode was produced by Sharon Bradley with technical support by Matt Waterworth. Ken Soy is the production executive for TELUS Originals DocTalks. DocTalks are produced on the traditional and unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. The viewpoints expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect those of TELUS.